Welcome to Becoming Awesome with Peter D.
Dr. Chaz Schatzel is a gifted medical intuitive. I recently had the pleasure of recording an episode of our Becoming Awesome TV show with Chaz, where not only did we discuss medical intuition, but we engage in the meditation so that you, the viewers, can actually immerse yourself in the field and receive an activation transmission to access your own medical intuition. Check the links below to see that full episode of Becoming Awesome, Receiving Medical Intuition Skills on Gnostic TV. Now, let's enjoy this wonderful interview about synchronicity and the power of just being in the flow and knowing with Dr. Chaz Schatzel.
Welcome to Becoming Awesome. I'm Peter D. Today we have a very special interview with Dr. Chaz Schatzel. We'll be exploring how to allow synchronicity in your life. Chaz is an esteemed chiropractor in Santa Fe, New Mexico, dealing with many healing modalities, including nutrition, your standard kinesiology, but a lot of stuff on helping people dealing with mold and other environmental problems. So before we get into this interview, please remember, push the like, push the share, push the subscribe, push the follow button. Your help allows the computer to send this information out to other people who are interested in becoming awesome. So thank you for your help. So here we go. Chaz, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for inviting me for our little chat today.
It's going to be very fun because it's mostly unscripted. We're just going to see where we're guided as far as the message of synchronicity takes us. Can we start off, Chaz, with you telling a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I graduated from Los Angeles College of Chiropractic in 1986. Practiced in Los Angeles for a few years and then moved to Santa Fe in 1990. I do a number of different chiropractic modalities. I do predominantly applied kinesiology and a subset of that called advanced muscle integration technique, which are both using the neuromuscular system as a way of getting insight as to where there's blockage to healing, the healing aspects of the body.
So I've been a patient of yours for over a decade, and I've seen tremendous healing results. One of the things that really interests me is when you explain chiropractic, you talk about tapping into the innate knowledge of the body. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the chiropractic was discovered by a gentleman by the name of D.D. Palmer back in the late 19th century. He was a very interesting man. Prior to him discovering chiropractic, he was known as a magnetic healer, and he was also a spiritualist. He worked with communing with the other side and spirit entities, which actually at that time was quite popular in the Midwest of the United States. A large percentage of people, churches were in that realm.
So when I've been on your table, you do something that I think is really interesting. You tap into source, into innate. What is it you tap into and you get information?
Well, D.D. Palmer taught that there's a universal intelligence, a field of intelligence that is within and around everything. And it's what animates our bodies. And within our body, we call it the innate intelligence. Those are two terms that he used over 100 years ago. And so his concept and his philosophy, and the philosophy I was taught as a chiropractor, is that as the spine and the joints of the body are in optimal alignment, it allows for greater download of the universal intelligence into the innate intelligence.
So when did you first notice that you had this field of information, of intelligence that you could tap into when you were providing treatment?
Well, that was a number of years it took me to really develop my intuition and connection to what the patient needed, not on a conscious intellectual level, an educated mind level, but more on an intuitive level. And I would say in the late 90s is when that gift became available to me, and I was able to start to tap into where people needed adjustments, where the interference is in their body. And it's nice because the kinesiology, which is a conversation with the nerve system, allows me to check if my intuition is correct. So I can ask the patient's body, if what I'm hearing they need is actually what they need, using the intermediary of the neuromuscular system.
Great. So over time, I'm assuming you've gotten more comfortable with it, and this has been a more reliable source of information for you. Did you notice anything that happened to you or that you did that improved your connection and your ability to use Source as a medical guide?
No, it hasn't really been something I've consciously worked at. I think it's just unfolded in years of experience in working with people and with bodies. It's kind of a gift, and yes, it has. I've gotten, I would say, over time, it's become more natural and easier, and my own conscious mind doesn't get in the way of it anymore.
So it could just simply be practice.
Yeah, just I think time and experience.
Great. Okay, so today's topic is going to be about synchronicity.
Sure.
And out of anybody I know, you're just right up there with synchronicity in your life. Would you care to share the story of when you really decided you were going to go forth in your medical practice?
Yeah, so Peter is part of this story. So let's see, it's a long story, but I'll cut to the chase with it. I was really sick in 2000. I awakened, or actually 2001. I awakened one day in the ICU in a hospital and had no idea how I'd gotten there. I went to sleep at night and woke up the next day in the hospital. Spent 3 weeks in the hospital and then 2 months in a nursing home. After that time, my mom was also, she had just had surgery for cancer, and at this time I'd been living in California. I'd left Santa Fe for a year and a half, or a year, and that's when I got really sick. So I got, my health started to come back about 6 months later. I moved to Cape Cod with my mom and was helping her recover from cancer, and I was recovering myself. So as I started to feel more confident in my healing process, I started to decide, well, what is it that I want to do? At the lowest part of that, I never thought I'd be a chiropractor again. I was so unhealthy. I never thought that I could be a healer. How could I help other people heal if I was so diseased myself? Now, as I started to improve over time, I decided I would have to go out to California and empty out my storage locker and get rid of all those belongings that were just sitting in storage. And I flew out to California from Cape Cod, where I was living with my mom. I bought a car, and I was driving that car back east, and I stopped here in Santa Fe and stayed with Peter on his couch. So I'm sitting on Peter's couch. It's the middle of the summer. It's July. It had been a terrible drought in Santa Fe for quite some time that year. And the morning I arrived, I got up and the thunderclouds came in. The rain started coming down. The rainbows were over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And it was just like, oh my God, I forgot how amazing Santa Fe could be. And sitting on the coffee table next to the couch at Peter's house, where I was sleeping on the couch, was a little paperback book on the astrology of the playing cards.
Your place in the cards.
And so I just picked it up and started reading it. Well, my card is the 8 of spades. And in reading the description in the book, It said something to the effect that, well, first of all, the title of the card is The Healer. That's the name of that particular card, the Eight of Spades. And it said if you are in service to humanity in the healing arts, you will have a wonderful life. But if you get too caught up in your own ego and in other pursuits, not in service to humanity, life will have its challenges. And it goes on and said a bunch of other things. I wish Peter still had the book, but he doesn't. Anyway, so I read that and I was just like, wow, okay, that's interesting. And, I was trying to decide what I was going to do. I was driving back to the East Coast and trying to figure my life out. And so after I left Santa Fe, I drove up to Denver to visit a friend up in Denver. And so when I got up there, the following day, my buddy Christian says, let's go up to Boulder and go hiking up in the Flatirons and take a hike, and then we can go down into town and have a meal and whatever. So we go for a hike, we come down, we go to Pearl Street, which is a walking mall. And in the summertime, they have a lot of performers there. There's singers, there's clowns, there's all these different street performers. And one of them, we happened to come up, there's a big circle of people and there's a guy in the center of the circle and he's like, and for my finale, I'm gonna take this card, and he has a little kid come pick a card for him out of the deck, and he says, I'm gonna take this card and throw it on the roof of that 3-story brick building. And he takes the card and he goes, and it goes up and it's just about to get on the roof. A big gust of wind comes up and blows it higher up in the air, and it's kind of swirling down, and it's doing kind of like a Forrest Gump thing. And it lands about 6 feet in front of me face down. In the meantime, he's got another card out and he says, oh, the wind was against me and everybody's paying attention to him. Well, I walk over and turn the card over and it's the Eight of Spades. And so it was very clear to me that my journey in life is really about being a healer and that being in service to humanity. So that's one synchronistic story I can share.
Yeah, synchronicity seems to be a big part of your life. It's recently become more and more in my life. I used to believe in luck, right? I remember I had a great debate with my friend in college. It went on for 7 days and 7 nights, and every day we argued. He was arguing the position of skill, and I was arguing the position of luck. And after 7 days, we came to the conclusion that they're both the same. And but for me recently, last fall, I got turned on to James Gillibrand and the East City Ranch, where you can go and see ETs in the sky. And I thought, well, I want to go there. And so I told my wife, I saw this video, look, I want to go see ETs, let's go there. And I looked into it, and it was like the timing and the money, and I said, it won't be for another year, okay? An hour later, after I make that decision that we're going to wait, an hour later I get a call from a client in Washington State who wants me to come up there in a couple of weeks to go do a training and to drive to the location in rural Washington where she was. I'd have to go right by the ranch from the airport to there. So I was like, I now had a all expense paid trip to go to the ranch. And so these things happen. And what I'd like to ask you, Chaz, is what in your life changed when you noticed that synchronicity is not random? Synchronicity is something that you're a part of.
Yeah, my life recently has been very synchronistic. I've almost been hit over the head with synchronicities. Starting at the new year when I took a week-long retreat around the holidays and started meditating more deeply every day and doing yoga and reading spiritual works, and it just kept coming up over and over. So my sense of what synchronicity is, it's source or spirit or whatever words you want to use, kind of asking us to pay attention, letting us know that we're on the right track. It's not a rational thing. It's really about our connection to a deeper intelligence. And in my mind, it's kind of paradoxical in a way, in that half the time we might not even notice these little synchronicities. And I think so part of that is becoming just more aware of how we are connected. Because ultimately, there's one intelligence field, and we're a part of it, and it's a part of us. And you hear the cliche term, we are all one, but underneath it all, that's reality. And synchronicity is an opportunity in time and space to tie us into that field and to wake us up.
I remember listening to a Cryan talk years and years ago, and he was talking about parking angels, because everybody's got their parking angels. They pray, and then the parking space opens up, and they're able to park. He says, well, what you don't realize is that if you're praying at 10 o'clock to get a parking space in front of this store, that means your angels are working with somebody at 9 o'clock to get them to go to the store so that they pull out right when you arrive. So it's like this time and space thing was blowing my mind. And can you say more about the connection? What happens when you're in connection?
Well, I'll just share another story of synchronicity. On Thursdays, 3 other chiropractors come to my office, and we all work on each other, and we do that procedure, advanced muscle integration technique. One of the chiropractors, it's probably 2 or 3 months ago, shared with me that Alan Hutner, who for 30 years ran a radio show on Sunday mornings called Transitions Radio. And they would interview spiritual and healthcare individuals, kind of like what Peter's doing, but it didn't really have the same motivation as Peter. But anyway, so Alan had passed away. And I knew Alan, and Ted, the other chiropractor, just shared with me that he had passed. And so I shared with Ted, I said, Ted, I'll have to share a story with you about Alan. It was the October of 1999, and it was Halloween weekend. And there was going to be a party at a mutual friend of ours, Janice Kolsar's house. And she was giving a Halloween party. I decided I would be the millennial magician. And I got dressed up in a magician outfit that I had created and learned a couple of cheesy magic tricks for my daughter's birthday party one year when she was 4. So I knew a couple of magic tricks, and I went to this party with my magic outfit on. And my thought was, the new millennium's coming, let's bring more magic into the world. And so I go to the party, and there's a bunch of kids dressed up in Halloween costumes, and they had me do my magic tricks, and and I ran out of magic tricks pretty quick, so I probably knew 4 or 5 of them. And the kids were all chanting, more magic, more magic, more magic. So I shared a story with them, the story of Abi Yo-Yo, which was a song and story that Pete Seeger, the folk singer, who's most famous for his song, If I Had a Hammer, and Turn, 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 and so forth. He was blacklisted as a communist in the 50s during the McCarthy era. So what he did to make a living is he had kids' music camps. And he would always play this song and story of Abi Yo-Yo, which was actually a story from Africa. And it was a story of a father who was a magician and a son who was trying to learn how to play the ukulele. And the son would go around town clanking on his ukulele and making a lot of noise. And the father was a practical joker magician. And someone would come home after a hard day's work, go to sit down, and zoop, he'd make the chair disappear and they'd fall on the floor. And it would go on like this. Well, finally the townspeople decided they were going to kick him out, the son and the father, out of the walled village. And they had to go live in a shack out in the fields outside of town. Now in this town, they had a story that the parents would use, or the grandparents would use, to keep their kids in line. It was the story of this monster, Abi Yo-Yo. And they'd say, hey, if you do something wrong, Abi Yo-Yo is gonna come and get you, and he'll eat you alive. And Abi Yo-Yo was this huge monster. Well, the father and the son woke up one day with the sun rising blood red over the hill, and the earth was shaking. And they looked out of their little straw shack, And there was Abiyoyo on the horizon with a sheep in one hand and a cow in the other hand. And the father looks at his son and he says, "Son, grab your ukulele." He grabs his magic wand. He says, "Son, if you can get the monster to lay down, I can make him disappear." So they run up to the monster, and all the people are up on the walls of the village going, "Don't go there, he'll eat you alive." And the son pulls out his ukulele and he starts singing, "Abiyoyo, Abiyoyo." Well, Pete Seeger lived in the town south of us. And so I had heard this story as a kid. And I'm telling it to these kids at this party. And the son plays faster and faster. Abiyoyo lays on the ground. The father makes the monster disappear. The townspeople run out and they bring them back into the town and welcome them in as heroes. And the moral of the story is, when you ostracize music and magic, monsters come. Well, I tell this to the kids, and I go home that night, go to sleep. I get up the next day, and it's Sunday. And on Sunday, we go to the celebration, which is how Peter and I originally met each other. And the celebration is a non-denominational spiritual community. I decided I'm going to wear my millennial magician outfit to the celebration. And as I'm getting dressed again, I couldn't find my cufflinks. And I'm looking all around for them, so I looked in my jewelry thing, and I opened it up, and in there was a slide, and I held the slide up to the light. And it was my brother Peter. And my brother Peter had passed away from leukemia when I was 13. While I was getting dressed, I was listening to Alan Hutner, the Transitions Radio, which plays on Sunday mornings here in Santa Fe. And on Transitions Radio, for Halloween, they had John Edward, the guy who had the TV show Crossing Over. And he was channeling Elizabeth Rose, Alan's partner. He was channeling Elizabeth's uncle, who had passed away. And he was telling her all kinds of things about it and so forth and so on. And so I'm listening to this, and they say, okay, and when the interview ends and the music plays, when the music is over, the third caller will win tickets to go see John Edward. He'll be at the Sweeney Center this coming Wednesday. Well, I win the tickets. I go to the Sweeney Center, and I go to watch John Edward. And he does his whole shtick about his history and his life story and so forth, which is very fascinating. And anyway, after the intermission, he comes back and he says, now we're going to do what I do. And he says, I have a being here with me that was a young man, a boy who died of cancer. And the woman sitting next to me stands up and says, oh, blah, blah, blah. And so John asks her, how old was your brother or your cousin or whatever it was who passed? And she's like, oh, 20. And he goes, no, this boy was younger. He was 11. And then he goes, and he had three other brothers and a sister. The sister was the youngest in the family. And he's describing my family. And I said, yeah, it sounds like my brother Peter. And he says, well, who's the musician? And I'm like, the musician? I go, there's no musician in my family. Well, he goes, no, your brother is telling me you'll really know it's him if you can say who the musician is. And I'm like, do you mean Pete Seeger? And John Edward says, who's Pete Seeger? And so I explained to him who Pete Seeger is, and then he says, yes, that's who your brother wanted you to know. Now, Pete Seeger, on Halloween Day, came to my brother's hospital room at Columbia Presbyterian in New York City and played Abiyoyo and all of his children's songs to the children's cancer ward where my brother was. And so it just gives me chills even talking about it right
Everything
now.
is so connected.
Okay, and then get this. So that night, after sharing this story with Ted and the two other chiropractors, I come home and decide I'm going to watch something on one of either, I can't remember, but I turned on a documentary that night. And the documentary that I was watching talks about a guy named Stephen Schwartz, who's a PhD who studied at Harvard and then got his PhD at Yale, and he was on the faculty at Yale. He left there to move to Tucson and start his PhD program in studying psychic phenomenon at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And that's what this documentary was about. He is the scientist who studied John Edward and documented John Edward's work as a psychic. Now that happened that night after telling Ted and Randall and Rick.
We're just in flow.
So, how does all that...
That's what I wanted to do this interview with you about, because this is not the normal stuff in most people's lives, but it can be. Before we go on, I want to just tell a little thing. I remember that party at Janice's house. The theme was come as your own superhero. All right? And I came as the illuminator, bringing light where there is darkness. But what's interesting to me is the theme of you are your own superhero. Are you going to step forward and live with it? You're talking about synchronicity. All right? And I read a series of children's books by Brandon Sanderson, and there was one character, his superpower was that he was unlucky. All right, he was very unlucky. So whenever somebody would shoot him, he would just manage to trip and fall and stuff. So his unluckiness saved his life over and over again. But I like the idea of, we have these superpowers, we don't really use them. We're in this synchronous field, which you clearly live your life through. Somebody who's just starting out, somebody who's just thinking, wow, you mean there's this field of consciousness I'm a part of and we're all connected and stuff happens. What recommendation or advice would you give to somebody just becoming aware of their being connected?
That's a very good question, Peter. And, my own experience is as we become more connected to our inner world, when we open our hearts, create coherence in the heart and the mind, we connect with the field, and that's where synchronicity comes from. As I said, it's a hint, it's a wake-up call that that's who we really are. We have these five sense bodies that we become programmed into thinking that's who we are. A lot of people say, yes, I'm having a physical experience, I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. Well, I think ultimately we're spiritual beings who are having spiritual experiences in a physical body. That's ultimately, my goal and my intention at this stage in my life is to be that spiritual being in this physical body, not a spiritual being having a physical experience.
Nice. So are there any practical things, tools, tips you'd like to suggest for somebody who's wants to expand synchronicity in their life?
Well, Stephen Schwartz, the PhD from University of Arizona, he wrote a book called Super Synchronicity. So if you're interested in synchronicity, that would be a nice way of intellectually delving into the concepts of synchronicity, and he shares some pretty outrageous, amazing synchronicities, kind of like what I just shared. And he's a PhD, and he goes into a lot more detail on the process and connection and so forth. So that's a nice tool to look at.
Any practices that you've been doing?
I think meditation. I mean, you and I have been doing some meditations from Joe Dispenza's work. And I think meditation in general, a lot of people don't understand or don't do meditation because they don't understand really what it is. When you say meditation, it evokes a certain feeling or thought, which is very different for each individual, depending on their understanding. But I think meditation ultimately is getting to know oneself. And, that's kind of a moniker that we hear, another one of those, know thyself.
Yeah, but it's not just a mental knowing of thyself. It's a physical, spiritual, endless consciousness knowing of myself.
Correct. It's our five senses are focused in the external, three-dimensional, dualistic world. You know, in 3 dimensions, the world here that we're interacting with at the moment and our senses interact with, that's one state of reality. There's a whole different state of reality within us, you know, and we have the potential and the opportunity to connect to other dimensions through meditation and through different spiritual practices.
Yeah, this is it. This for me is what's been driving me. It's just becoming awesome. And as I become awesome, my guidance has been very, very clear. Share this. And that's why I wanted to interview you and focus on how we can put this in our practical lives. We're going to start to wind this down soon. But first, folks, please remember, like, subscribe, share. Please help us out, the computer algorithm. If you'd like to make a donation, I'm going to try to use whatever funds you give to hire a social media manager and to improve the quality of these podcasts. So let's help get this message out to more people. You can do that. Click the donation link below, or if you're listening, go to becomingawesome.podbean.com and click the patron button. becomingawesome.podbean.com, click the patron button. Now, Chaz, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, the simplest way is go to my website, which is backtohealthsantafe.com. That's the easiest way. You can also contact me at my email address, which is my first name, Chaz, C-H-A-Z, then doc, D-O-C, @gmail.com.
Great. Super. So, closing words. What would you say to folks listening that you would really want a last chance to get the message out there?
Sure. You already have everything you need if you're a living, breathing human being. No matter where you are, what you are, you're connected. You're connected to that greater field of intelligence, that universal intelligence. And it's a journey for each of us in our own way, but it's worth the discipline, time, and effort any which way you can to know that inner self. You know, I don't know what else to say on that note.
Well, I'm just happy to celebrate this journey, and I'm happy that everyone listening can say, well, maybe there's a chance that this isn't just some guy with an interesting life. Maybe there's a chance that I have this synchronous ability, potential, and if I just allow or step into or meditate until I find it, I can have a life that's just magic. And that's really what it is for me, is waking up every morning knowing that it's just magic.
And it is. And yes, our consciousness and awareness is what connects to what we consider magic. And magic, magic is only what we don't yet understand.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing with us today, Dr. Chaz Schatzel. My heart to yours, many, many blessings.